Here is how I use dopamine loading to get ripped, okay? A lot of you guys will struggle with your fitness goals, okay? A lot of you might have set fat loss goals, fitness goals, whatever it may be. Your goal at the end of the day is probably to lose fat and build muscle, okay? And what comes with that is a lot of the time a calorie deficit. Now, a lot of people struggle with calorie deficits, maintaining a calorie deficit, and basically staying in this deficit for a long enough period of time to where they can see fat loss. Now, in today's video, I'm going to explain how you can use dopamine loading to get ripped in a matter of weeks or months. Now, dopamine loading is essentially this. You have a task that you need to do in the day. For example, you need to study. Now, you have your studying, which is your main task for the day, and then you also have other things in the day that you do. Maybe you scroll on your phone. Maybe you go out with your friends. Maybe you watch a movie. These events and these things that you do in the day give you a lot of dopamine. They make you very, very, very excited. And it's basically a reward mechanism for your brain. And your brain treats anything that has a high level of dopamine with excitement and with joy. Now, the problem is, a lot of us wake up, go straight on our phone, and our dopamine receptors are extremely fried. So we give ourselves dopamine right when we wake up. And then we don't really feel like doing anything because we've got this dopamine already. Dopamine loading is essentially where we take this event that's very exciting for our brain and we put it after the difficult event. So let's say you guys have to study. You have to study for an exam. Before going and scrolling your phone, before going out with your friends, before watching a movie, do the work. And what we do is then we say, if we do this work, later on in the day, once we've finished the studying, I will allow myself to watch the movie or go on my phone. By adding the dopamine heavy activity after our studies, it becomes easier for not only our brain to focus, but for us to want to do that activity first in order to get to that high dopamine event. And once this sequence happens a few times, our brain understands, okay, once we do this work, we get a reward at the end. And we start to pair working with a high level of dopamine. A very similar but slightly different concept applies with fat loss. You guys have a goal, an amount of calories that you need to consume in the day. Your maintenance might be 2,500. So your calorie goal may be 2,000. Now, a lot of people struggle with being in these deficits for a long period of time. They struggle because maybe they're used to eating 2,800. Maybe they're used to eating 3,000 calories. So they're going to struggle to eat 2,000 because it's much less than this. So how can we use the concept of dopamine loading with fat loss to make sure that we can hit our daily and weekly deficit goals to then therefore hit our fat loss goals? Well, you need to look at it like this. In the week, if you didn't already know, there's 7 days. We have 5 days in the week. What the fuck am I talking about? We have 7 days in the week. People need to be, or maybe your deficit goal is 1,800 or 1,500. You need to eat that many calories. I'm just going to use the example of 2,000 calories. So in order to hit your fat loss goals, you need to eat 2,000 calories per day. Let's just say you try to do this. So you have 2,000 calories on Monday, 2,000 calories on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There is quite a big problem with this. Number one, it's very difficult to stick to. There is not many people on this planet that can sustain a very strict, objectively low amount of calories every single day of the week, okay? Not only is it very hard discipline-wise, but also your body genuinely gets hungry, especially if you're in like a 500 or 600 calorie deficit. It's hard to maintain these days every single day in a row. But the bigger thing is that by having to stick with this deficit every single day, there's no fun, okay? Our body and our brain, especially if you guys love eating food or you enjoy certain foods that may be higher in calories, there is absolutely no fun in this layout that we have here. All we have is 2,000 calories on Monday, chicken and rice, maybe that's eggs, maybe that's beef on Monday. The same thing on Tuesday, same thing on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Where's the fun? Where's the dopamine? Where do we even get to this concept of dopamine loading if there's absolutely no dopamine in 2,000 calories a day with boring foods every single day of the week? How are we going to use the concept of dopamine loading with the example here? Well, what we're going to do is something really, really simple. We need to look at our weekly deficit. So a lot of people get fixated on the daily deficit. I need to be in a 500 calorie deficit Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That's fine, right? And that technically is the case, but generally you need to be looking at the week. How much deficit are you on for the week? Okay, so I'm going to put a total here. And obviously, instead of writing total calories, I'm going to write total deficit. Okay, so obviously, if our maintenance is 2,500, then obviously we're in a 500 calorie deficit every single day. So adding that up for the week, we're on a 3,500 deficit. So sure, the daily deficits are important, okay? The daily deficits are definitely important, but they're only important because they add up to a weekly deficit, and that's the overall view of, are we doing this on a larger scale every single week? And that is what our weekly deficit is. Now, because we know that the main important thing is our total weekly deficit, we can have a bit of fun with this, and we can use the concept of dopamine loading to essentially give us a bit of fun, but also make sure we can still hit our fitness goals in a better and more sustainable way, which is what we need for fat loss. We need a sustainable process, not some boring, weird piece of advice. So here's what we're going to do. We need to be in a 3,500 calorie deficit. If I haven't said that 500 times, what we're going to do is we're going to say Monday, we're going to be very strict, okay? Instead of eating 2,000, this might sound weird, but we're going to eat 1,900, okay? Tuesday, we're going to eat 1,900. You might be thinking, where is this going? Wednesday, 1,800. Thursday, 1,800. We are in total currently in a huge deficit every day. 600 calorie deficit here, 600 here, 700 here, 700 here. So what's the excess? Well, the excess here is we're in 100 more than we need to be. Again, 100, 200, 200. So that means the total is 600. So we've actually cut back 600 extra calories. How is this any more fun? Well, we have Friday, Saturday, Sunday left. Here's where we can have some fun. So we can actually increase our calories on, let's say, this day to 2,300. Okay? Now all of a sudden we can take 300 off that number because we're no longer following our goals here, and we have 300 left. We can have another 300 here, and then we can finish the week off at our normal baseline. So how is this dopamine loading, you may be wondering? Well, essentially, what we've done is we've been strict with ourselves, but not overly, okay? So yes, we were going to have 2,000 calories here, and we've had to cut back an extra 100, and here we had to cut back an extra 200, but it's relatively the same number. And what that does is cutting back those extra 100 calories or 200 calories, which might just be the difference of one slice of bread. We've now been able to add 300 calories onto Friday and 300 calories onto Saturday, which gives us an extra balance. But here's where it gets better, because another way of doing this is not even cutting back calories. You see, what we can actually do here is still have 2,000 calories on Monday, 2,000 calories on Tuesday, 2,000 on Wednesday, 2,000 on Thursday, and because we've been so strict with ourselves, we can allow ourselves an extra 300 today, 300 today, and 400 today. Well, you're thinking, well, all of a sudden, we've gone from being in a perfect deficit to now reducing our deficit. How is this sticking to our goals? Well, here, instead of cutting back on food on these days, we can do extra cardio, okay? So, we can do an extra 5k steps. Now, an interesting stat from my personal phone is that when I did about 6k steps a day, which is what I averaged for around 6 months, I burnt an extra 280 calories on average, roughly. Which means that on these days, sure, we're eating the same amount, but if we add in an extra 6k steps, we're burning an extra 280 calories. We have 1,100 extra calories that we've burnt, okay? So we've actually burnt an extra 1,120 calories over these days, which means that we can add them onto these days, which means that, you know, here we've added on an extra 1,000, and in fact, we could do even less cardio, or we can eat even extra another 120 calories. And you know what? I'll actually add even another 120 because I've only added 1,000 here, so I'll add 420 here, And that means that we've actually re-added those 1,120 calories on the last 3 days of the week. But this is super simple, guys. Either we cut back slightly on the calories every single day, or we maintain the same amount of calories every single day, but we do extra cardio. And what is this? How is this linked with dopamine loading? By doing these extra steps, or by being extra cautious on our calories, only by an extra 100 or 200 per day, by the time it's Thursday and it's the time we want to kind of have fun, we've done the hard part. We've done the, in the studying example, we've done the studying. We've done the difficult part. We've done the extra 6,000 steps per day to burn enough calories, or we've, been in the 100 or 200 extra calorie deficit per day to give us the allowance to then eat extra on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or whatever days you want to put this on. Which means that, in this case, we were in a greater deficit, and we added those extra calories that we burnt, and we added those extra calories that we didn't eat onto these days. Or you can simply stick at what you're currently doing, add an extra 6,000 steps a day, which will on average burn about 300 calories, which amounts to this much, and then you can go ahead and add that on. So the hard part is done from Monday to Thursday. The really difficult part of either cutting back extra on your calories or by doing extra cardio. It's not easy, and this is the difficult part. This is as I said, the equivalent of doing the studying early on in the day. We do the difficult part early on in the week, and then that means that on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday we can relax and we can do the thing that's fun. We can eat the fun food. We can have something that's 500 calories on top of our normal meals, because we've given ourselves this allowance by being in the extra deficit or by doing extra cardio. That is essentially how you can use dopamine loading to get shredded.